Yeah, I think stuff to do with family overwhelms me quite a bit. You know, worry or stress around family side of things, that does overwhelm me quite a bit. But in terms of, you know, doing the job and things like that, I don't feel too overwhelmed by that. Not now, anyway.
The recording was never meant to exist. The voice on it was unmistakable. And the moment it went online, William made one phone call that changed everything. The leak that shook the palace. It was live for 4 minutes before anyone inside the palace knew it existed. 4 minutes. That is all it took. 4 minutes for a hidden audio recording of Queen Camilla to spread across 3 platforms, get picked up by 17 separate royal commentary accounts, and land in the inboxes of journalists. These were from 2 major British newspapers who had been covering the monarchy for decades. By the time the palace's digital monitoring team flagged the alert, the recording had already been heard by thousands of people. When a senior communications advisor picked up the phone to report it upward, the clip had been downloaded, copied, and reposted enough times that removing it from the internet entirely was no longer a realistic option. The date was the 14th of April, 2026. It was a Monday morning. The palace was preparing for a routine week of engagements. There was nothing on the official calendar that suggested anything unusual was coming. No state visits, nor sensitive announcements. No events that would have put the communications team on elevated alert, which is exactly why the leak landed the way it did. Nobody was ready for it. The recording appeared first on a private channel operated through an encrypted messaging platform. It was posted without any introduction or explanation, no name attached to the account. No context provided for what listeners were about to hear. Just an audio file, 3 minutes and 47 seconds long, uploaded at 7:18 in the morning. Within 60 seconds of its appearance, it had been forwarded into 3 separate royal gossip groups with a combined membership of over 40,000 people. Within 2 minutes, a screenshot of the audio waveform had appeared on a major social media platform, accompanied by a single line of text. "You need to hear this." That line was enough. The clip moved the way only the most explosive pieces of content move online. Not gradually, not with a slow build, instantly, unstoppably, with the kind of momentum that tells you, within the first few minutes of watching it happen, that there is no version of events where this stays contained. A junior member of the palace's digital monitoring team was the first person inside the institution to encounter it. She was running a standard morning scan of royal-related content across major platforms when the alert came through. She listened to approximately 45 seconds of the recording before she stopped it and reached for her phone. The call she made went to her direct supervisor. That call lasted less than 2 minutes. Within 10 minutes of that call ending, the alert had traveled up 3 levels of the palace communication structure. Then, it landed with the senior advisor responsible for crisis management. He listened to the full recording once. Then he picked up the phone and called William. Sources close to the royal household say William was at his desk at Adelaide Cottage when the call came through. He had been reviewing a schedule of upcoming engagements. The call came in at 7:41 in the morning. He listened without interrupting as the advisor walked him through what had been found, where it had appeared, and how far it had already spread. When the advisor finished speaking, William asked 2 questions. Sources have not disclosed what those questions were, but they have confirmed what came immediately after them. Within minutes of that phone call ending, William had issued a set of instructions that the palace's communications and security teams would spend the rest of that morning scrambling to implement. Those instructions are what royal insiders have since referred to as the lockdown order. It was not a term anyone inside the palace used lightly. It was not the kind of language that gets attached to routine crisis management. It implied something broader, something more urgent, something that went beyond a communications team working to suppress a damaging story. It implied that what was on that recording was serious enough to threaten something much larger than Camilla's reputation. And it was. But to understand why William reacted the way he did, you first need to understand what he heard when he listened to that recording. What was on it is not what most people expected. What was on the recording? 3 minutes and 47 seconds. That is not a long time. In the context of a normal conversation, it is barely enough to get past the opening exchange. But in the context of what was captured on that recording, 3 minutes and 47 seconds was more than enough. more than enough to expose something that Camilla had spent considerable effort keeping private. It was more than enough to give William every reason to issue the instructions he issued that Monday morning, and more than enough to ensure that once people had heard it, they could not unhear it. The recording captures a private conversation. Two voices. Camilla's is the dominant one. The second voice is male, familiar to those who have followed the royal family closely, and identified by palace investigators within hours of the leak going public. Sources have confirmed his identity, but the palace has not named him officially. What sources will say is that he is not a member of the royal family. He is someone who has operated in the orbit of the palace for years, someone with enough access to be trusted and enough proximity to be dangerous. The conversation begins ordinarily enough. There is small talk, a brief exchange about a scheduling matter, the kind of opening that suggests neither participant was aware they were being recorded. And then it shifts. Approximately 40 seconds into the recording, Camilla begins speaking about William, not in the careful, measured language she uses at official engagements. Not in the diplomatic, considered tone that characterizes her public statements. She speaks about him the way people speak when they believe nobody is listening, directly, candidly, and in a way that leaves very little room for interpretation. Sources who have heard the full recording describe her comments about William as cutting. She questions his judgment on a specific institutional decision that had been made in the weeks prior. She suggests, according to those same sources, that his approach to managing the monarchy's internal affairs is driven more by personal grievance than by genuine strategic thinking. She uses language that palace insiders describe as dismissive in a way that would be deeply damaging if heard publicly. But that is not the part that triggered the lockdown order. There is a moment, approximately 90 seconds into the recording, where the conversation moves onto different ground. The male voice asks a question. Sources have declined to repeat it verbatim. But the question, according to those with knowledge of the recording's contents, relates to a specific internal palace matter, a matter that had not been made public. A matter that, at the time of the conversation, was still being handled entirely within the institution's private channels. Camilla's response to that question is the part that stopped William cold when he heard it. She does not deflect, nor does she stay vague. She answers with a level of specific detail that tells you immediately she was not speculating or summarizing something she had heard secondhand. She was speaking from direct knowledge of internal processes, knowledge of decisions that had not yet been formally communicated even to all of the senior figures within the palace structure. Sources describe her answer as a disclosure, a voluntary, unprompted sharing of sensitive institutional information with someone who had no authorized access to it. In any institution, that would be a serious matter. In the British monarchy, where the boundary between private knowledge and public exposure carries consequences that stretch far beyond individual reputations, it was something considerably graver than serious. There is a third element to the recording that sources say made the situation even more complicated. In the final minute of the conversation, Camilla refers to Catherine. It is brief. It is not the focus of the exchange, but the way she speaks about her daughter-in-law, the tone she uses, the specific characterization she offers of Catherine's role in a recent palace decision is something that sources describe as unambiguous in its intent. It was not neutral, it was not kind, and it was not the kind of thing that could be explained away as a moment of frustration taken out of context. Put all three elements together, and what you have is a recording that manages, in under 4 minutes, to expose private institutional information, reveal Camilla's genuine feelings about William's leadership, and demonstrate a level of animosity toward Catherine that the palace had always publicly denied existed. All of it captured, all of it circulating online, all of it impossible to retract. William did not need to be told why the recording was dangerous. He heard it himself. He understood within minutes exactly what it meant and exactly what it threatened. The question that consumed him in the hours that followed was not what was on the recording. It was how it had been made, who had made it, and how it had found its way from a private conversation to the internet in the space of a single morning. That answer was darker than anyone inside the palace had anticipated. How the recording was made and who leaked it. The first question palace investigators asked was simple. How does a private conversation between two people inside one of the most secure institutions in Britain end up on the internet before breakfast? It is not a question with an easy answer. The palace's physical security infrastructure is extensive. Its protocols around private communications are strict. Senior royals and the people around them operate under layers of confidentiality agreements, device restrictions, and monitoring arrangements that are designed specifically to prevent exactly this kind of exposure. And yet, the recording existed. It had been made and kept, and it had been released with a precision of timing that told investigators almost immediately that this was not an accident. This was deliberate. The conversation, sources say, took place in late February 2026. It happened inside a private sitting room at Clarence House, a room that is swept regularly for recording devices as part of standard palace security procedure. The last sweep before the conversation took place had found nothing. The room was clean, which meant the recording had not been made by a device planted in the room. It had been made by someone in it. Palace investigators narrowed their focus quickly. The conversation involved two people, Camilla and the male figure whose identity investigators confirmed. Within hours of the leak, the recording was clean. No background interference. No indication that it had been captured from a distance or through a wall. The audio quality was consistent with a device held or positioned within a meter of the speakers. Someone in that room had recorded it intentionally. The male figure was interviewed by palace security within 24 hours of the leak going public. Sources say he denied being responsible. He denied having any knowledge of how the recording had been made or how it had reached the internet. He cooperated with investigators, according to those same sources, and his cooperation was described as genuine rather than performative, which left investigators with a conclusion that was uncomfortable in a different way. If neither participant in the conversation had made the recording, then someone else had been in that room, not visibly, not officially, but present enough and equipped enough to capture 3 minutes and 47 seconds of clean, clear audio without either Camilla or the man she was speaking with realizing it. That possibility sent a cold current through the palace's security team. Because it meant the breach was not external, it was internal. Someone with access to Clarence House, someone who knew Camilla's schedule well enough to anticipate where she would be and when, had placed a device in that room after the last security sweep and before the conversation took place. The window for that to have happened was narrow. Camilla and the male figure whose identity investigators confirmed. Investigators calculated it at less than 4 hours. 4 hours during which a small number of authorized staff had access to that part of Clarence House. A list that investigators were able to compile quickly and begin working through methodically. By Wednesday morning, 48 hours after the leak, palace investigators had identified a person of interest, a former member of Camilla's household staff. Someone who had left their position in January 2026 under circumstances that sources describe as abrupt and not entirely voluntary. Someone who had, during their time on staff, developed an intimate knowledge of Clarence House's layout, Camilla's daily routines, and the gaps in the building's security sweep schedule. Sources say this individual has not been formally charged. The investigation is ongoing. Palace lawyers have been involved since Tuesday evening. The full legal picture is still being assembled. But here is the detail that sources say troubled William most when investigators briefed him on their findings. The recording had not been released immediately after it was made. It had been held for approximately 6 weeks, kept, stored, and released on a specific Monday morning when the palace's communications team would be least prepared for it. That gap between the making of the recording and its release was not carelessness. It was calculation. Someone had sat on this for 6 weeks, waited for the right moment, and then released it with the intention of causing maximum damage. This was not a disgruntled former employee venting frustration. This was a targeted operation, planned, patient, and aimed with considerable precision at the heart of the palace's most sensitive internal dynamics. William understood that the moment investigators told him, and it changed the nature of his response entirely. William's lockdown order and what it actually meant. When people hear the phrase emergency lockdown, they picture something visible, doors being sealed, guards repositioned, a building going dark from the outside while something urgent happens within. They picture the kind of dramatic, physical response that makes clear to anyone watching that a serious situation is being managed in real time. What William ordered on the morning of the 14th of April, 2026, looked nothing like that from the outside. From the outside, the palace looked exactly as it always does. Engagements proceeded. Staff moved through corridors on their usual schedules. The gates remained as they always are. No visible disruption, no obvious sign that anything had changed. But inside the institution, across the specific systems and channels that keep the palace's internal operations running, the lockdown was immediate and total. It began with communications. Within 30 minutes of William's phone call with the senior crisis advisor, a set of internal communication restrictions were activated across palace networks. Certain categories of sensitive internal correspondence were frozen pending a security review. Access to specific document repositories was suspended for all but a handful of authorized individuals. The encrypted internal messaging system used by senior household staff was taken offline temporarily while its logs were pulled for examination. These were not measures the palace had improvised that morning. They were part of a pre-existing emergency protocol that William's team had developed and refined over the preceding 18 months as part of the broader institutional modernization effort. A protocol designed specifically for situations where an internal security breach had occurred and the full scope of the damage was not yet known. The fact that the protocol existed tells you something important. William had anticipated that something like this could happen. He had not known when. He had not known what form it would take. But he had prepared for it, and on the morning the recording leaked, that preparation is what allowed the palace to respond with the speed it did. The second element of the lockdown order concerned devices. Every member of staff with access to the areas of Clarence House relevant to the investigation was contacted and asked to surrender their personal and work devices for forensic examination. The request was framed as voluntary. Sources say it was understood by everyone who received it as something considerably less optional than that framing implied. Most complied immediately. A small number requested clarification before handing over their devices. That clarification was provided by palace legal advisors who had been on calls since early that morning. By midday, the device collection process was largely complete. The third element was the most significant, and it is the one that tells you most about how seriously William was treating the situation. He ordered a full suspension of all non-essential external communications from senior household staff until further notice. No briefings to press contacts, no background conversations with royal correspondents, no informal updates through the back channels that palace staff and journalists have used to manage the flow of royal information for decades. Complete silence. Imposed immediately, with no specified end date. That instruction landed differently to the others, because those back channels are not just convenient. They are part of how the palace manages its relationship with the press. Shutting them down entirely, even temporarily, sends a signal that goes beyond crisis management. It tells every journalist who covers the monarchy that the institution is in a mode where it trusts nobody outside its innermost circle. It tells them that whatever is happening inside those walls is serious enough that even the usual carefully managed leaks cannot be permitted. Royal correspondents noticed within hours. Several attempted to reach their usual palace contacts. Most received no response. Those who did received a single, consistent message: no comment at this time. Sources say William reviewed the full scope of the lockdown order himself before it was implemented. He did not delegate the details. He went through each element personally and approved it line by line. That level of direct involvement tells you where his head was that morning. This was not a situation he was willing to manage from a distance. He wanted his fingerprints on every decision. He wanted to know that what was being done was exactly what he had authorized. Nothing more, nothing less. But even as the lockdown settled into place across the palace's internal systems, one person had still not been told the full extent of what William had ordered. That person was Camilla. And when she found out, the confrontation that followed was one the palace had not fully prepared for. Camilla's reaction and the internal fallout. Camilla was told at 11 o'clock that morning, not by William, not by Charles, by a senior household advisor who had been tasked with delivering the briefing in person. The advisor arrived at Camilla's private sitting room at Clarence House with a written summary of the lockdown measures and a brief verbal explanation of why they had been implemented. Sources say Camilla listened to the full briefing without interrupting. When the advisor finished speaking, she asked one question: "Who authorized this?" The advisor told her it had come from William. The room went very quiet after that. Those with knowledge of what followed described the next 30 minutes as some of the most tense inside Clarence House in recent memory. Camilla did not raise her voice. She did not, sources say, display the kind of visible anger that might have been expected given the circumstances. What she displayed instead was something more controlled and considerably more purposeful. She picked up the phone and called Charles. That conversation, sources confirm, was not brief. It lasted the better part of 20 minutes. And unlike the Sunday afternoon call during the accounts freeze, this one did not end with Charles declining to intervene. This one ended with Charles agreeing to speak to William directly. That agreement gave Camilla something she had not had in the previous months, of mounting institutional pressure, a temporary foothold, a sense that the reigning king was still, on some level, willing to push back against his son's decisions on her behalf. She moved quickly. Within an hour of her call with Charles ending, Camilla had contacted her private legal advisor, a senior courtier, and a communications consultant she had worked with for years. Sources say the message she gave all three of them was the same. She wanted the lockdown order challenged. She wanted it on record that it had been implemented without her knowledge or consent. And she wanted a formal internal review of the authority under which William had acted. It was, sources note, almost exactly the same position she had taken during the accounts freeze, a challenge built on procedural grounds rather than on the substance of what had been found. And it ran into almost exactly the same wall. Because by the time Charles spoke to William that afternoon, William had already been briefed by investigators on the device evidence, on the 6-week gap between the recording being made and its release. On the former staff member who had been identified as a person of interest, he walked Charles through all of it, calmly, thoroughly, without editorializing. Charles listened to everything. Then he told William to continue. Sources say that when Camilla received word of Charles's position, the controlled composure she had maintained through the morning finally cracked. The conversation involved two people, Camilla and the male figure whose identity investigators confirmed. Not publicly, not in any way that staff outside her immediate circle witnessed. But those who were present describe a moment of visible distress that was unlike anything they had seen from her before. It was not anger this time. It was something closer to the realization that the ground she had been standing on was no longer as solid as she had believed, that the one relationship she had always been able to rely on to buffer her against institutional pressure was beginning, slowly and painfully, to shift. Charles had chosen the institution twice now in the space of weeks, and Camilla, for the first time, was beginning to understand what that meant for everything that came next. The fallout from that understanding would shape the final chapter of this story, and the consequences it set in motion inside the palace are ones that sources say nobody, not even William, had fully anticipated. The aftermath and what the palace cannot walk back. Some things, once they happen, cannot be undone. Not by a press release. Not by a carefully managed public appearance. Not by the kind of quiet, institutional repair work that the palace has relied on for generations to smooth over the fractures that accumulate inside any family that lives its life under permanent public scrutiny. The leak of that recording is one of those things. And the reason it cannot be undone is not simply because people heard it. It is because of what hearing it confirmed, not just for the public, but for the people inside the palace who had spent years telling themselves that the tensions at the heart of the royal family were manageable, containable, something that could be held together with enough discipline and enough careful presentation. The recording made that story impossible to maintain. In the days that followed the leak, the public response moved through a recognizable pattern: initial shock, then the rapid, relentless cycle of analysis and commentary that attaches itself to any major royal story, then something more durable. A settled shift in the way a significant portion of the public understood the relationship between Camilla and the generation preparing to inherit the crown. Polling conducted in the week after the leak showed a measurable drop in public support for Camilla. Not catastrophic, not the kind of collapse that forces an institution into emergency public relations mode, but steady, significant, and, sources inside the palace, noted with quiet concern, concentrated most heavily among the demographic that William has consistently identified as the monarchy's most important long-term audience: people under 45 years old. These are not people who grew up with Camilla as a peripheral figure in a distant royal drama. These are people who had largely accepted her as part of the current landscape of the monarchy. The recording changed something in that acceptance. It made it conditional in a way it had not been before. For William, that shift mattered more than almost any other consequence of the leak. Because his entire modernization project rests on a foundation of public trust, the transparency frameworks, the accountability structures, the deliberate effort to present the monarchy as an institution that earns its place rather than simply occupying it. All of it depends on the public believing that the people inside the palace are genuinely committed to the values they publicly represent. A hidden recording of the Queen Consort dismissing her stepson's judgment, disclosing sensitive institutional information, and speaking about her daughter-in-law with barely concealed animosity does not sit easily alongside that project. William understood that, and sources say it informed every decision he made in the days following the leak. He did not give interviews. He did not issue statements about the recording's contents. He let the lockdown work quietly and allowed the legal process around the investigation to proceed without public commentary. What he did instead was appear, visibly, consistently, at engagements that had been on the calendar for weeks, standing beside Catherine, composed and focused, and entirely present in a way that communicated, without a single word being spoken about the recording, that the center of the monarchy was stable. Catherine's role in those appearances was not accidental. She was positioned, sources say, with deliberate intent, not as a contrast to Camilla, but as a demonstration of what the palace's future looked like: calm, purposeful, entirely undistracted by the chaos that was circulating around them. It was, sources say, exactly the message William wanted to send. For Camilla, the aftermath has meant something different. Her public schedule in the weeks following the leak has been lighter than usual. Several engagements were quietly rescheduled. Her communications team has maintained the same careful silence that the palace imposed across the board during the lockdown, releasing only brief, formal statements where absolutely necessary. She has not addressed the recording publicly. She has not confirmed or denied anything about its contents. She has not, as far as sources are aware, made any further attempts to challenge the lockdown order through institutional channels. What she has done, sources say, is wait. Whether that waiting reflects a strategy or simply the absence of one, nobody inside the palace is entirely sure. What they are sure of is this: the recording changed the conversation, the lockdown changed the power dynamic, and the two of them together have left the palace in a place it has not been before. A place where the future is no longer something being carefully prepared for somewhere in the distance. It is already here, already making decisions, already leaving its mark on everything it touches. And everyone inside those walls knows that the William and Catherine era has not just begun, it has announced itself. The recording leaked and the lockdown followed, and in the space of a single week, the balance of power inside the palace shifted in ways that cannot be reversed. William did not just respond to a crisis. He used it to show the world exactly who is really in charge now.